Hi, my name is Christian. I'm a sophomore at the University of Arizona and a reporter for the Daily Wildcat. On this episode of Cat Chat, I spoke to Rocque Perez and we talked about his experiences with ASUA, his thoughts on the upcoming fall semester, and some more things. Hopefully you enjoy our conversation, and if you haven't already, please follow Cat Chat on Instagram at CatChatUA, or subscribe to the YouTube channel, or sign up for the weekly newsletter. Thanks. All right. How's it going? How's your week been?
It's been interesting week. I've been kind of busy. So I currently work, well, kind of. I basically made my own internship because I kind of lost my job when everyone started getting laid off at the university.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in order to like keep my professional ties, but also like continue my network, I basically created my own internship under like different people under senior leadership at U of A. So I've been kind of doing that. So I'm all over the place.
Yeah, that's cool. Is that like for like credit?
Yeah, so I am able to get it from a public relations minor. So I'm able to do that. So it's been interesting.
Cool.
What about you?
Uh, I mean, there's not much to do. I'm in New York. We can't really go out much, but
Yeah, that's great.
it's been pretty good. Like before all this bad weather, I was able to like, you know, go out on runs and stuff and kind of enjoy nature with my family. But
Yeah,
other than that, just writing for the Daily Wildcat, you know.
yeah, that's fun. I mean, you're never short of a story though, right?
No, there's a lot going on, I can say that.
Constantly.
Yeah, especially with like now that we're officially going back, to like they're having in person and opening up the dorms
Which is
in the fall.
interesting.
It is definitely interesting. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things that like happened during the re-entry meeting yesterday, but my favorite was definitely the food robots. I have to say, he said that like Robbins was just like, "Oh yeah, keep an eye out for food robots." And I was like, "Whoa, what?"
Yeah, that's not a shock to me actually, because ASUA had actually looked into doing that last year.
Really?
Because NAU's been doing that for I think 2 years now.
Right. I think they rolled it
Um,
out in 2019. I saw an article about that.
yeah, so it wasn't out of the blue, I guess, but it was actually a surprise that he actually went forth and actually did so, just because our campus is like so open to the public, whereas like Flagstaff and NAU are almost one. So it's a little bit
Oh.
different community wise, but that'll be interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be really different, you know. I'm sad that it's like happening only during my second year because like I don't like my college experience for the next 3 years could be like completely different from like how I imagined it or how it's been for other people. And so
Yeah.
I don't know. And I'm sure for you, like, I don't know, you're probably worried about like being able to graduate and like walk on the stage or whatever, which this past graduating class didn't get to do. So
Yeah, I think I've become a little desensitized, to be honest. I think like realistically 2020 really like destroyed any like prospective college dreams I had. I mean, even before
uh,
we, left for spring break, I throughout the month of February, I kind of saw it coming. And, then ASUA elections happened, which was a very interesting time for me.
mhm.
Um, and then literally elections happen, spring break, and then on the Friday before spring break was over, is when everybody was like, nope, nobody's coming back. And so
Yeah,
I don't know, from
that was
then on it
crazy.
was like it was a different trajectory. I can't say the word. But I think it's just like about like adapting, because I mean realistically journalism is still going to be there, public relations is still going to be there. It's just in a different capacity, and I think we've adapted well. So I think if anything, we're privileged in comparison to the people that are like already in the workforce. So
That's true. Yeah, there's a lot of people who like can't do work over Zoom because like that's all I've been doing.
yeah,
Like my whole daily Wildcat experience has basically been over Zoom, doing like Zoom interviews. And so, you know, I could say like it's actually probably better because I don't have to like go to all these places and I can just stay in my house. Like all the people who are like food service, all the people who
mhm,
actually have to be in person are either like laid off or they have to go into work and like risk their lives and their health, which is really unfortunate. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see like what precautions we take as we go into the fall. And I'm sure people have a lot of questions. And
Yeah. I think it's kind of disappointing too, because I mean, like, I don't know, like U of A kind of sets precedent for like the entire city for like Southern Arizona. So it's like,
even the
U of
whole
A gets to
state,
open back up.
being the best Arizona school, people look to
But I
us.
mean, not even that too. And now that we talk about it, like I think any of the Arizona universities, the public institutions, they kind of set precedent for everyone. So it's
Mhm.
like, oh well, how come ASU and U of A get to open and not my local business? So it does kind of set a precedent. So that'll be very interesting if numbers start to rise because of us.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see. Do you think that they would like close again and send us home the same way they did after spring break? Or do you think they'd be more hesitant to do that and just kind of weather the storm if we do see an uptick in cases?
I think they would definitely weather the storm, because I think ultimately, like, I don't think that they're really realizing that they can't control everyone. I think that they kind of have this optimistic mindset that um, that everybody's going to behave in good faith, but at the end of the day, nobody's going to be able to control Chad and Brad and Sig Up from celebrating syllabus week with the entire fraternity, and then bringing half of Greek Row with them. So
Right.
I think that they have a lot of other factors that nobody's really brought forth to them, or they have been brought forth, and they're just choosing not to consider them. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry if you're in Sig Up or anything, but
No, I'm not. No. I'm in like the pre-law frat. We don't,
Oh, in
we
pad.
listen. Yeah. We listen to
Oh,
lawyers
cool.
come in. That's
I
basically
love
it.
that. I was thinking of actually joining this semester.
Yeah. Are you interested in going into law?
In a variation of law. Like, so I think like government, uh, so ideally I'd love to continue working in like government community relations. And it's definitely a trend that you have to have your JD to go into a lot of those fields.
Mm,
So, or it's a desired qualification. So more than
right.
likely that'll be what I'm doing.
You're a poli-sci major and a communications major, right?
Political science, and then my minors in public relations, but I think that it's going to become a major in the next year. So
Ooh,
I'll more than likely stick that out and just get that degree as well.
gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So the main thing I wanted to talk about was your experience with ASUA. And I started to talk to you because I see you a lot on like Instagram and Twitter.
All over the
You're one
place.
of the more like, I don't know, popular U of A people. So I think, yeah. So I wanted to talk about your experience as an ASUA. I think it was, what was it called? At large senator?
Mhm.
Yeah. So uh, I guess we could just start with like, what is ASUA, uniquely from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think that it's weird because uh, ASUA's focus points are serve, engage, and empower. But I think that one of the very confusing things is whether they're serving, engaging, and empowering the people within ASUA or those beyond the organization.
Hmm.
But ultimately, I think as a student government, their their tasks or their responsibilities entail serving the greater interests of the student body. And so they've been able to do that through different programs and services. I think there's about 13 or so now. And then advocacy efforts at the university administration level, the city of Tucson, Southern Arizona, and at times the federal government as well. So it's a really, really great combination of different opportunities for both people within ASUA, but also um, advocating for the interest people beyond it.
Hmm. And so you ran for senator, I guess, in your sophomore year. Would that be correct?
Yeah, so I ran for, at the time it was a senator at large, and then during that term, both myself and the current president of ASUA, Tara Singleton, we did a couple of changes to our Senate bylaws. So it's now student body senator.
Gotcha.
And so I ran again during my sophomore year. So I served 2 terms, and then at the end of my junior year, I ran for president.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so, like, what were, I guess, some examples of policies that you passed while you were senator?
So I was a little bit all over the place. So I think I was very much in the learning phase my sophomore year. But going into my junior year was definitely like one week after another with something. So there was resolutions in regards to voter registration. So there was a partnership with Next Gen America. And so one of the resolutions was in regard to promoting civic participation, I think. So that included one, voter registration, but also um, enacting like a census campaign in some ways. What became of the census campaign was a little bit different just because 2020 turned into a complete fiasco. But I think that one resolution alone was definitely my focus throughout the past couple of years. And then another couple of highlights were resolutions in regards to equity and inclusion, so recognizing different situations that have happened across campus. I kind of talked about it at one of the A board meetings in the last year, but kind of highlighted that, as a university, we've wronged every single marginalized community. We've literally checkmarked every single box. So there was that, and then one of the big ones was definitely making the University of Arizona a Purple Heart University. That was definitely one of the more exciting moments of being a part of ASUA. Was being able to work with a group of students to promote a part of the student body at the administrative level. So that was kind of working with the president's office on, hey, we don't want this to look like we're coming for you guys. We genuinely want to work with you to create a Purple Heart University. And so with the help of President Robbins, we were able to sign a declaration with the Order of Purple Heart, and then I went a little bit further, and we were able to get ASUA Senate to invest in a initial Purple Heart scholarship. And so when that happened, it was a super exciting time. I think Kirsten Cinema had even highlighted that on social media as well. So it was really cool to see like some of my work being acknowledged at the federal level. I think she had even given an acknowledgement on the Senate floor at one time too. So super exciting stuff with that.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think it was just, any time a prevalent situation that happened on campus and we had to address it.
Gotcha. So, like, is there anything that I guess ASUA can't do? Like, what are the bounds of, like, I guess their influence or their jurisdiction?
Yeah. So I think it kind of comes to what that administration's willingness is to be a friend or a foe of administration. Because I think at the advocacy level, there's so much bureaucracy. Should I say something? Should I not say something? Should I hold my relationship with this dean or the provost or the president? So there's that inner working that becomes a little bit hazy. But in regards to governance, it operates almost like any other nonprofit organization. You can't contribute to political campaigns, so that's why our club funding process is so rigorous because, worst case scenario, we accidentally invest into, college Republicans or young Democrats on accident, and that would cause ASUA to get into some legal trouble. But other than that, there's not really any restriction. I think it's ultimately just what anybody's willing to do.
Mm-hmm. So, like, could hypothetically, like, ASUA pass like a resolution or something that like administration like can't impose like X amount of fees, or they have to start an initiative to create an open source textbook or something? Is that something within ASUA
Yeah,
jurisdiction?
so I think like ASUA would definitely serve it as an advisory in nature.
Okay.
Because I mean, anything that we say, it can be quickly overturned by, President Robbins or the
Mm-hmm.
provost. I think that's a perfect example of the last couple months alone. That what the students want isn't necessarily what administration can or will be willing to do. But ASUA has been a part of deep systemic change at the University of Arizona. And I think it's also set precedent at other universities because at a time, ASUA was a part of, I forgot I think it was the Arizona Students Association, ASA. And that was basically a coalition of all three university student governments that came together to address certain issues. And they still do that time to time, but it's a little bit different. But anywhere from, open source textbooks to, there was a time where you didn't have to pay into certain fees at the university. And so, ASUA was able to go straight to ABOR and actually get that taken care of at the highest administrative level to ensure that students didn't have to pay into stuff that they weren't using. But one really cool thing too is that, as a senator, and in the future House of Representatives, because I'm not too sure if you're aware of that, but in the legislative branch, you can be appointed to different boards, councils, and commissions at the university level. And so I think I've served on about 12. I was definitely the person who served on the absolute most. But then I also had gone and served and was appointed by the city manager to serve at a couple at the city of Tucson, under the city of Tucson. So again, it's just a matter of what that person is willing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So where does ASUA get its funding? Does it get a slice of club fees, or is it get funded by the university?
Yeah, so it's a pot of a lot of different avenues. So one of the hugest ones is definitely from the bookstore. So I think early on in the past couple decades or so, a partnership was created between the university bookstore. And so ultimately, I think around 350 to about $450,000 from the bookstore. That's collected through, the sale of books, technology, all that stuff. Ultimately goes into ASUA to serve as different spending for student opportunities. And then I believe through the student services fee, they're able to collect funding for our ASUA stipends and salaries. And so there's a certain allocation in the student services fee that I think is automatic on a 3-year or so basis. It depends on what that student services fee board decides to allocate to ASUA. But there's also some positions that are decided year to year. So for example, the student legal services advisor, I don't think they have one right now, but that is a perfect example of student services fees being used to serve students as well. So there's that, and then also through the University of Arizona's foundation. So anytime, a donor, let's say a past senator wants to give, I don't know, $10,000, they can do that through the UA Foundation as well. And so that's actually the biggest way that Campus Pantry gets a lot of money as well.
Cool. So after you served as senator, you also ran for president. And so I wanted to know, what is it like to run for president of ASUA?
It's really interesting. There's actually, despite the turnout, that was actually definitely one of my most educational moments so far. And I think I kind of left with a greater turnout as an individual than it was professionally. So I think one thing is definitely navigating the initial decision to run. Because it's, you have to look at whether or not you could win, who would be willing to support you, but also what are your platforms. I think there was 2 or so years ago, there was a student that was part of Greek Life, and he had ran on the basis that he wanted to change the drinking age in the United States. So, that was very interesting, and, whether or not he took it seriously or he was doing it for a joke, that does have a huge impact on students because, what if he was elected? Ultimately, that's the person who makes, multi-million dollar decisions at a, student administrative level, and how, that year's student services might turn out and what the success of the university might be too. Because the ASUA president does have a say in a lot of these, huge issues. So there's stuff like that. But then also, the elections process is a little bit weird. It's definitely unique in comparison to other universities, in that, you can't run on a ticket. So you can't, have a VP that you are running with and campaigning with. So you have to do this, purely as an individual. But then also, when you're getting signatures to even become a candidate, you can't say that I'm running. You can't say, hey, I'm running for president. Can you sign this petition so I can become a president? It's ultimately, kind of walking around this weird line. But then the actual election process is really, again, ultimately whatever that student wants to do. So I think in my case, it was really interesting because this is such a heated time in equity and inclusion in our campus. And I ran on the basis that I really wanted to change a lot of those, systemic issues. And so as a senator, I had proposed that we make constitutional changes to ASUA. And so I think that at the time it looked like creating a mandatory position for a VP or a director of equity and inclusion and student wellness. But ultimately, other people came into that conversation that didn't necessarily agree with me. And it did turn into a pretty unfortunate situation because a lot of people were lying about it. So it kind of painted me in a really ugly picture because it made me kind of look like I didn't consult students. When in actuality, it was a proposal to consult with students.
Can you elaborate on that if you feel comfortable?
So basically what happened was when I had proposed this whole constitutional amendment, it was focusing on lightening the workload of the ASUA president, because despite this belief that as an ASUA president you want the most absolute power, not only did I want that for the potential chance that I did become president, but also I felt that for the success of ASUA, that the ASUA president shouldn't be stretched so thin. And so ultimately, if a president's not answering emails or going to meetings or is having people in the moment having to attend things for them, I think that says something not about the individual, but also just the work, the great length that someone in that position has to go. And I think that's happened every single year. And plus, it's only a $7,000 stipend. You're sitting at the table with people that are getting paid upwards to $895,000. So it was a lot. And so ultimately, the constitutional amendment was extending some of that workload to the president's cabinet in ASUA, but also creating that equity and inclusion and student wellness position that ultimately, in my eyes, would have been able to create a student community council that entailed representatives from, all the different cultural resource centers, any student centers, and then also, kind of similar to Senate, at-large people as well. But ultimately, it would have served advisory in nature. So unlike ASUA Senate, it wouldn't have to have so much bureaucracy and policy standards. It would ultimately just be, people voicing their concerns. But then ASUA president, one, didn't like me to begin with, and also the ASUA EVP and herself were dating. So there was a lot of workplace environment things that just weren't the best. And so, I did speak up on a lot of situations that I saw a lot of inaction. And, it was a little bit frustrating to be in my second year as a senator. And, people come to me and tell me, hey, I really want to do this. And I have to refer them to someone who wasn't even going to answer their emails. So I can get into all that. But basically with that position, once elections came along, not only was one of the ASUA president candidates from, a severely marginalized community, but she also worked in equity and inclusion, and I do too, actually. But I think she was kind of using that opportunity to kind of, you know, diminish my efforts and say that I had an agenda that I didn't. I genuinely, I'm a first generation Latino student who's part of the LGBTQ community. I think I kind of had a say in some of those things. So I think it was just a matter of, politics and who's going to make it farther. So, yeah.
Gotcha. That's tough. What do you think about the now elected president? Do you think that we're in good hands?
Yeah, absolutely. Me and Tara, we both had gotten into freshman class council when we were freshmen. We were both at-large senators our sophomore year. And then going into our junior year, I really confided in her in a lot of things in ASUA, whether it was personal or professional. It was a bit of shock to me that she ran, to be completely honest. But I do think that kind of came about because of then current ASUA president. But Tara is extraordinary. She's like literally one of those brilliant people like I've encountered at U of A. I think my main concern now and even before, elections was that I think that this was definitely a potential turning point for ASUA, because it was an opportunity for someone who actually identified with the communities that ASUA serves. And so, I kind of touched on it that I am a first generation student. I'm self-supporting. I don't have parents. And then also, part of the LGBT community. So I think I kind of identified with a lot of student communities, whether or not I've reaped the benefits of, the LGBTQ community center or, the Guerrero Center. Like I didn't feel the need to reap the benefits of those centers, but I actually knew where these people were coming from. And so I think it would have been an amazing opportunity to bring that into ASUA. But on the contrary, Marianne Hassan, who is the administrative vice president, absolutely amazing. And I'm so excited for her, I think, to compensate for that lack of in ASUA. I think she already has, in the I forgot which coalition it was, but you were there.
I think BSU and COBA, yeah.
Yeah, and that was an unprecedented confrontation with President Robbins and university leadership. And I don't think ASUA needs to be the friend for anyone right now. I think they definitely need to be very vocal about not only, systemic racism or advocating for students, but also what's going on with the pandemic. So I think ASUA is definitely in good hands. But I do think that at some point there needs to be significant growth. I guess one thing to also add on there too is that despite the turnout of the election, during the elections, we were able to pass what became of my original constitutional amendment. And so while they didn't agree with having a community council, they did create what's now going to be coined as a House of Representatives in ASUA, which is interesting. I know that from what I remember, there was representatives that are going to be, from places on campus that aren't even centers, so I'm not too sure what that elections process is going to look like, because it's going to be done per that organization that representative is coming from. It's not going to be voted on similar to ASUA Senate. So it's definitely going to be an interesting process trying to navigate that, I think, for the current ASUA administration, because they don't have that familiarity. And so that'll be really interesting. But again, on the contrary, more representation in ASUA, more student opportunity. So
yeah,
only great things.
Do you know any more about the House of Representatives? Because I was kind of confused. I remember seeing that on the ballot as like something we voted on. But I was kind of confused. Like, are these representatives from some of the colleges or like schools within the colleges? And like, is this an advisory? I was just kind of confused.
Yeah.
Do you know anymore?
You're just as confused as I am.
That's not good.
It's weird because the legislative branch in ASUA, previously the Constitution allowed the university to allocate no more than $50,000 at the most per academic year. And so what they were able to do was unfortunately decrease that 50,000 down to, I think, either 25 or 30,000. And then to, I think, compensate for the increase in compensation. So I think the House of Reps are definitely going to be compensated the same way Senate is. I think a little bit smaller, which is unfortunate because it's like, I think that if anything, the House of Reps might be more representative than the Senate. But basically, the representatives are coming from not colleges, but from the different cultural centers, First Cats, the Thrive Center, the Vet Center. So any type of center on campus that focuses on a specific demographic at the university will be able to appoint a student. The only concern that I had with that was that how is that going to look? Because it's like, what if there's, someone who's in charge of, say, I don't know, a student center, and maybe that director has, a fairly good relationship with this one individual, but despite their good relationship, they choose not to give that appointment opportunity in the House of Reps to someone who actually serves that individual community. So it's like, I think there's a lot of integrity issues with that. Because if it's going to be appointed that way, it seems a little bit iffy.
Mm-hmm.
But then
Yeah.
also, if they're going to be voted in, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how the election process will work or appointment process will work, but they'll ultimately still have the same saying things the way that Senate did. So, they'll be able to create resolutions. They'll be able to, I think, be able to attend, administrative meetings, serve on boards and commissions and stuff like that as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, personally, like, I don't know if an election process for House of Representatives would be the best because, like, we couldn't even fill, I think, the College of Humanities. Like, no one ran for a
Yeah,
senator of College of Humanities. So if we do wind up having elections for the House and it's going to have more representatives, then, who knows if we'll even get most of the seats filled.
yeah.
But yeah, so like all right, with my limited knowledge of government, would it work? Would the House of Representatives work with the Senate in the same way that, like, in U.S. government, like, both have to approve a resolution for it to
Yeah.
pass?
So coincidentally, when all of this was happening, this constitutional amendment was passed by ASUA Senate to be on the ballot. The one meeting that I didn't attend, and I think that was done on purpose. But um, but basically, that would have been my primary concern because how is one part of the legislative branch going to enact legislation that the other body might not agree on? And coming into this first year for this organization, what if this group of ASUA representatives are very vocal, which is great, but what if their seemingly progressive ideas contrast the people that become ASUA senators who might be more establishment, I guess let's say, if we want to talk like consider it in politics,
Uh-huh.
because they might have more of like that systemic knowledge that might not be more dream big as the potential ASUA representatives might be. So how would that legislation work? So none of that was defined. None of that was written anywhere. I don't think it was discussed. And so I think that's going to be a very interesting thing for them to navigate coming into this next year.
Mm-hmm. And also, on the other hand, right? So, like, if they do both have to approve it, like, that would stall any resolution or any, like,
Yeah.
policies that we'd have to enact. And then if both don't have to approve it, then you might not get not necessarily like what the representative body wants, or it might fast track it. And did you say that the details weren't written anywhere? Like, do you know if there's any way we can
They were
find?
not. So I think that you can actually go onto the ASUA website, and it might be the latest version of the Constitution that might be posted on there. If it's
Mhm.
not on there, that's going to be really unfortunate because that's actually against the law. But
Oh.
um, I think that it was. I know that it definitely wasn't defined anywhere the way that the actual organization would operate.
Mhm.
Um, I think it was more so just the foundations of who's going to be a part of it. But even that alone, so many concerns because I think one, ASUA Senate having the opportunity to receive $50,000 was huge because in the past, you know, a lot of the stuff that happens in ASUA or that has become of ASUA has started in ASUA Senate or a variation of what was the legislative branch. So, the programs and services, they are adopted through ASUA Senate. Campus Closet, I think it was, that was something that we started I think it was during my sophomore year, and it's now becoming a full-fledged program.
Mm.
Campus Pantry at some point, um, you know, was a student initiative that ASUA Senate ultimately decided to bring into ASUA, and it's now become one of the hugest programs on campus. So I think that that decision to decrease the opportunity funds in ASUA Senate was definitely a huge punch in the face to students, but also um, I think it was definitely taking away opportunity from prospective senators because for example in the next census in 2030 that'll be another opportunity for a senator to come forth and say, hey, I want to ensure that students are being advocated for at the congressional level. Let's do something for the census. What if they're not able to afford programming or marketing materials because now I think what now is the spending limit is 25 now is now being split between 30 representatives in the House and
Wow.
16 in the Senate. So I think it definitely is decreasing the opportunity in the ASUA legislative branch.
Interesting stuff going on at ASUA. All right.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting as well to see what happens with that going into this next school year. I do want to transition now to specifically talk about your campaign or your campaigning.
Yeah.
Um, so I noticed that you're very like, I guess, media or tech savvy. Like I noticed
Yeah.
you had a really nice website.
Thank you.
I saw your posters everywhere on like the social sciences building.
Yeah.
So definitely had the name recognition. I could say that.
Yeah.
So I was curious, like, what do you think is like the most or some of the most important things to pay attention to or keep in mind when someone is running a digital campaign of any kind? Like, so whether it be running for ASUA, if they just want to, if they have an organization they want to raise awareness about, in your experience, what have been the most helpful things to keep in mind?
I think what I might look out for might not be the same that most people should or would. I
Okay.
think because we all have our own individual interests is why people are so investigated right down to the T. But I think one thing that's really important for me is that in any position that I'm in or any time I meet anybody, I think it's really important to um, be very vulnerable. And I think that that was something I definitely exemplified more than anyone was I think my willingness to be vulnerable with people. Because I think it's important when you're looking at someone, it's one, the foundationals, who are they? Why are they doing this? And so I think it was more so that purpose. And then also um, the platforms. I've always hated the word platforms. I think it's really weird because it's like punchlines. It's like, oh, civic engagement, oh, student fees, or in that one guy's case, the drinking age. Like it just, it's really superficial and surface level. Um, but I think that looking at what their interests are, because I think even having been in ASUA Senate, I came in with those punchlines because that's what I was told I needed to have. I needed to have punchlines. Um, and what became of everything I did was so much more and so much greater because I literally got to meet, people at, the United States Congress. Like I've gotten to, sit across from the governor. I've gotten to do so many amazing things and meet so many interesting people. I wouldn't say great. But so I think it's definitely looking at what their interests are going to be. But then also, what are they willing to do to get there? Are they transparent? Are they willing to be innovative? Are they communicative? Because I think definitely one of my issues is how nobody, people either don't know what ASUA is, people don't know who might be the president, people might not know, what they do, what they stand for, or people might not even care. But at the end of the day, some of their decisions, some of these people's decisions in ASUA could make or break a student experience. They could create an opportunity for someone who hasn't gone here yet. Or it can make life a lot easier for someone who does. So I think it's definitely looking at the root of an individual.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so um, say someone was a freshman and they were interested in running for Senate or maybe applying for one of the appointed positions. Like one of the things that I found out my freshman year was that there was a youth basketball league for middle schoolers. And so I wound up being a coach for that, by the way.
Yeah.
So there's so many parts of it that are people might not know. What would you say to someone who wants to get involved in ASUA? Um, you know, is there a certain type of person? What are the best qualities for someone who wants to get involved?
I think it's honestly it's just a matter of you being passionate about something, or not necessarily being passionate about one individual thing, but I think just being passionate about getting involved, helping others. I think definitely those foundations, because not everybody wants to go and shake hands with a politician. Not everybody wants to go paint canvases with the Wildcat Events Board, or plan rides with Spring Fling, or talk about sustainability. So I think it's just a matter of what you're interested in. So I think definitely reaching out to those people, reaching out to the ASUA president. I think just going into the office. But I think as a freshman, my advice wouldn't be to get involved with ASUA right out of coming in. I think it's definitely creating your foundation, because ASUA changes year to year. The people graduate. It's very different. But creating a foundation for yourself around the university, finding a friend group, getting involved with the different clubs, meeting people, in leadership positions at U of A, I think is definitely more important than going straight into ASUA.
Hmm. And so, speaking of freshmen, we have an incoming freshman class. We're going to be starting in a month. Um, you're a senior now. You've had, I guess, about 3 years of experience here at the U of A. What are your tips for incoming freshmen? Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I would say definitely ask questions. Definitely get involved, whether or not, you see yourself being in something for the long term. I think just, kind of putting yourself in a position to be uncomfortable, or just meet new people is definitely, a growth opportunity. That's why you're coming to college. But I think also, appreciating the people that are around you, making sure that the people that are around you are people that, that are willing to adventure college with you. So I don't know. I think it's ultimately just get involved, ask questions, and do big things.
Definitely, I agree. All right. Well, we're running up on our time here. Is there anything else you'd like to say or talk about?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
All right.
Bear down, go Cats.
Bear down, go Cats.